My hair's all over the place today. I wanted to do a video response to the Indefatigable Theist because she makes a few claims in her latest video to Mr. Repzion that I thought were really interesting. I think she's an intelligent girl, and she brings up the question of abortion, and it's really interesting to me that she does. Mr. Repzion's video is about feminism and how these, self-proclaimed feminists are angry that the royal family is having a baby or something. And he says that it's morally reprehensible that these women are, want the girl to have an abortion because simply because of the fact that it's a boy. The Indefatigable Theist makes this counter move, which I think is it re-accents the video in a different way. Like, I feel like she's inscribing something into the video that's interesting. She suggests that why would it be morally reprehensible to want someone to have an abortion, but not morally reprehensible to get an abortion, right? And then she associates this with pro-choice and pro-life. Now, there's a lot of conflations going on here, and this is what I never quite understand about the pro-life discourse, so I suppose I'll just ask you, Indefatigable Theist, because I have a few friends who are active in the pro-life movement, actually, and when I hear their discourse, I just feel like there's points that are just sort of being tripped up, right? They're just points that are sort of being weirdly crammed together. I would consider myself pro-choice. But for me, that's very much a statement about law, not a statement necessarily about morality. I find myself uneasy about the question of abortion, in truth. I think that there's something about, it depends on how things are handled, right? Like, I consider it to be a much more subtle issue. I don't have a problem with, like, the morning after pill or something, but, like, talking about third trimester abortion for no good reason or something like that, like, that's something that would make me feel morally uneasy. Or, like, partial birth abortions and stuff. Now, maybe that's just remnants of my Catholic upbringing that make me uneasy about these kinds of things. But nonetheless, I would consider myself to be pro-choice. And the way I understand the pro-choice argument, if you like, is that, first of all, even if we say, this is how I would articulate my version of the pro-choice argument, I'll put it that way, I don't want to speak for everybody. If we say that abortion is morally reprehensible, then it should be the goal to lower the quantity of abortions, right, that take place. At that point, the pro-lifer, it seems to me, has to be committed to the idea that making abortion illegal would reduce the quantity of abortions in the world. And, I mean, the data just doesn't back that up. If you look at countries where abortion is illegal, they don't have less abortions per capita. They're just infinitely less safe. And they're infinitely less, they're not treated as medical procedures in the same way. And that, I think, is a terrible outcome. To me, that seems like, if we were to make, on these grounds, like, given that, I think that if we were to make abortion illegal, it would be kind of a sanctifying ourselves while hurting large quantities of the population. The fact of the matter is that, like, morality and law are two different discourses. So you can say that, having an abortion is morally reprehensible, and still be pro-choice, right? I think that lying is morally reprehensible. What would it even look like to make that illegal, right? Our morality, we don't legislate morality. That's not how law works, right? And that's not how morality works either. But that collapsing of legality and morality is, I think, a humongous danger. There's something proto-fascist about it, right? If you look at forms of fascism that have appeared, and I'm not calling you, Indefatigable Theist, a fascist or a proto-fascist, but I'm saying that the move has some kind of dangerous potential in it. If you look at the history of fascism, one thing that you find about that discourse is that the state is conceived of as the arbiter of morality always, right? Whereas in liberal democratic nation states, right, the law is something that's negotiated. It's something that emerges out of discourse. It's something. It's tied to social contracting and stuff like that. It's just not tied to morality, though we hope that there's overlap, right? So the question is using the law the best tool to reduce the quantity of abortions in a society? I think that's a really interesting question. Now, aside from that, I don't consider myself as being equipped, I guess you could say, to make assessments about the moral content of actually having an abortion. I can say that I said before that certain iterations of that can make me feel uneasy, right? Morally uneasy. But I'm not actually equipped to make those judgments, am I? Right? Like, I don't understand the internal workings. I don't understand the subjectivity of somebody who, like, let's say a 15-year-old girl with all her life ahead of her, who all of a sudden gets pregnant. Even through, like, a rape or something, right? something horrible like that. And even not through a rape, right? I just don't understand the subjectivity. So I don't consider myself to be one to be passing, like, moral judgments, right? And I certainly don't feel comfortable in equating that to murder, in some sense. So I don't think that there's this question of this harsh either-or. Now, I can say that it does make sense to say that it is morally reprehensible that people would want an abortion on the grounds of gender. I can condemn, the one-child practice in China that led to a bunch of baby girls being aborted. But that's not like that. That the grounds that I would condemn that on have nothing to do with the fact that there's an abortion taking place. The grounds that would be tied to is something more like an objection to eugenics, right, or population selection, exclusion of one group over another, based on biological characteristics in a radical way, right? The word genocide is too strong, right? But there's something like that at work. Now, that element doesn't have to be present in all conversations about abortion. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be. It can be, right? Like, and I've seen some people, both on the pro-life side and on the serious side, because I don't think that there's I think that there's an intelligent way to make the pro-life case, actually, but I don't think that I see anybody doing it. But I have seen some serious people suggest that allowing, or the legalization of abortion sort of contained minority populations from exploding, and etc. And so, like, you can look at this as a structurally race-related issue, and then things get a little more difficult to manage and maneuver. So there's lots of issues, right? There's lots of issues surrounding abortion. It doesn't come down to this. This is what I don't like about sort of the pro-life narrative. It's the idea that either you take a really strong stance or you don't, right? Things become very black and white when you take things in this way, in a way that I don't think is representative of how people actually feel about the issue. I know a lot of people. I know even a lot of feminists who would say something like, I would never be able to have an abortion myself. I wouldn't be able to bring myself to do that, but I would fight to the death for, to allow that right to exist. So that's a much more nuanced position, right? It's not simply, yay, abortions, or abortion is murder, right? There's a lot in between. All that being said, I don't think that we can properly conceive of abortions as being identical to, say, infanticide or something like that. I mean, the moral content is different depending on, again, the different kinds of emphasis, and we're going to need much finer sort of toolkits, much more subtle language, much more subtle reasoning here, in order to deal with the world and the complexities of the world, then I think that what I would say the most common pro-life narrative sort of allows for. We live in a democracy, right? And because of that, our legal system is predicated on the negotiation between different persons. And as a result, politics is always compromised. You can't have a pure politics in democracy. It doesn't make sense. So this sort of vision, and this vision cast in this radically uncompromising way, seems to me to be anti-democratic in a sense, and that's where I would sort of criticize the pro-life stance. So yeah, things are just much more complex, and I don't think, I don't know Mr. Repzion's video work, and I don't really know his stuff at all, but I think that within a pro-choice framework, you can make the case that wanting somebody to abort their child on the basis of the child's gender is morally reprehensible, without necessarily claiming that abortion as such, in all cases, in all times, in all places, in all blah, 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 is also morally reprehensible. These things don't seem to be mutually inclusive, necessarily. So yeah, that's just some ramblings on the issue of abortion. And yeah, have a good day.